Hey everyone, Steve Miller here with an Asia Now feature from the September 25th edition of Asia News Weekly. In this podcast, I chat with Hong Kong Democratic Chairwoman Emily Lau about the Occupy movement and what the Democrats are doing today. October is just around the corner, marking the one-year anniversary of when students and other civic-minded leaders took to the streets of Hong Kong pursuing universal suffrage and standing firm against a Beijing plan that they said amounted to creating a fake democracy. In May of this year, the Beijing plan was voted down in a peculiar and bizarre turn of events that saw the pro-Beijing members of Hong Kong's legislature leave chambers just before the vote was taken, and thus handed a rather easy victory to the pan-Democrats. But as we near this anniversary of the so-called Umbrella Revolution, what's been going on since then? Yes, student leaders like Joshua Wong have faced charges for their roles in the protests, but what have the pan-Democrats been up to? For that, I rang up Emily Lau, chair of Hong Kong's Democratic Party, and asked her.
We try to get the Hong Kong people still, engaged and try to press Beijing to give us another package so that we can vote on and have democracy. And of course, things are difficult, but I don't think we ever give up. And then, of course, as you may know, that in August, officials from the Hong Kong-Macau Affairs Office actually came to Hong Kong to meet with me and also with some members of my party. And that was really very, very exceptional because for years there was no meeting whatsoever. And then of course, I refused to go to mainland because I don't have the travel document. And I said I will never step foot there ever again unless and until I can travel freely. So the officials came to Hong Kong as they are, and I actually invited them to lunch with a few other members of my party. So I guess that development is, although nothing new was said, but what's new is that the meeting took place. But of course I know one swallow does not make a summer. But the fact is, that has taken place, and it took place without the involvement of the Hong Kong government or the central government liaison office here. So I guess to them, it was quite shocking. And the fact that Beijing took it into its own hands and came down and to meet with us. But whether that would lead to other things happening, we don't know. And I told the officials that it is very important that they also meet with other people from the pro-democracy camp, no matter whether they are in the Legislative Council or outside, because there are many people in the camp who have been sidelined. And as a result, Beijing could not hear our side of the story. And so when they devise policies, the policies do not go down well. And the city is completely split asunder by the very, very bad policies of the chief executive, C.Y. Leung, and by the policies of Beijing.
Yeah, well, let's follow up really briefly with the liaison officer that's there in Hong Kong. I mean, he recently said that the chief executive was essentially, he possessed a special legal status that transcended the territory's executive, legislative, and judiciary branches. I mean,
which is very stupid, I think.
My question to you is, has that changed any of the dynamics inside the legislative body?
Not really, but it just shows you how stupid he is to say such things. Because everybody then come out and say, oh, well, actually nothing has changed. Everything is according to the basic law, and he's still subject to the law. But people are saying, well, what do you mean by this transcending status? And he has not really come out to explain it. So some people just laugh at him and say, oh, he thinks he is above the law. But of course he is not. And but that's the thing. They keep saying things which are very provocative, which cause a lot of controversy, and doesn't really help to, foment good atmosphere so they can push forward their policies. It is very, very disturbing if they continue to behave in such a way.
Well, is it essentially this, that they're putting out into the open that they will not accept anything else than a pro-Beijing chief executive in the office?
Well, I think that that is something that Beijing has made quite clear. That's why the package was voted down, because the way the package was designed was to ensure that whoever even tried to stand for election has to be acceptable to Beijing. So it's nothing new. They said it, throughout, that, they must have someone that they can have confidence in. And they crafted the package in such a way, and we voted it down. So it's nothing new.
We're looking forward to 2017, and the current election system is going to be in place to cast the ballots for the next chief executive. Do you think that you and your colleagues can get an alternative program in place, an alternative system in place for the election after that?
We will try. We have tried for decades, and we have not yet succeeded. But we're not going to stop trying. As the saying goes, like a bad penny, I'll keep turning up. So we're not going to stop. But it's difficult.
Well, what do you think it's going to take?
I don't know. Now, I know there are certain things that Hong Kong people will not wear. They don't want violence. They don't want a revolution. But if it is peaceful protest, I'm sure they support that. But we had the occupation for 79 days, didn't result in democracy. And as some Hong Kong people say, the occupiers overstayed their welcome. So they lost support too, because initially there was a lot of support. But after a while, the people say, oh, come on. And even the Occupy trio wanted to stop it, but the students refused. So it did not really work that well. But I think Hong Kong people want to, use peaceful means to fight, but they don't want violence.
Do you think that because the Occupy movement, quote unquote, overstayed their welcome in the streets, that could have a damaging effect on future protests?
I think people would be careful. Well, last time it happened as an accident because the government fired 87 rounds of tear gas. It's not as, the Occupy trio, they had actually planned the occupation. They wanted it on October 1st. They wanted it outside in the pedestrian precinct outside Mandarin Hotel.
Right, and the students came early, yeah.
Yeah, so it all happened. It was not planned. And some people would say, wow, if you have a big movement, a big protest, and if you don't know how it's going to end.
I guess what I'm really asking is that because there's that negative feeling associated with the amount of time that the people were in the streets, do you think that people will be less reticent to step forward and, come out in the open and protest? Or they just say, have the attitude, not this again?
Some may, but some may not. But as I said, people would tend to be more careful, whether it's the participants or the organizers, because, as people rightly say, you don't start something that you don't know how to end. Because then when people ask you, you start this, you want me to join, how is it going to end? And you say, I don't know, there's no exit. And then people will not join. So people will be more careful. But that does not mean that people will not do it. I think we should become wiser and more careful when we do things in future. But of course we're going to have demonstrations in future.
Well, that was one of the big criticisms that a lot of people had, was that there essentially was no exit strategy other than a complete win for Hong Kong's universal suffrage. And that
there's no exit strategy because the people could not agree. The various parties involved could not agree. And in a way, it is sad. You have the political parties, you have the students, you have the Occupy trios, you have the NGOs, and then everybody initially agreed to let the students to be in the forefront. So anyway, I guess in future, when we do certain things, we should try to sit down and map it out more carefully rather than to let events just, take things over.
Has that process started? Have there been conversations on how to work better together since then?
Well, I think within the Legislative Council, amongst the pro-democracy parties and politicians, we do work closely. But with the students and all that, I think they need time to settle down. As you probably know, the Federation of Students has not disintegrated, but quite a number of university unions have opted out. So they withdrew from the Federation. And then, of course, some students and others, the Occupy trio, they have been arrested. And some have been charged, and there will be a whole series of trials that would take place in the coming months or years. So I guess we need time for all these things to settle down and for people to see their own position and to reflect and to work with others. It is quite a long process.
Well, turning a gaze further down the road, past the 2017 elections, what do you think needs to happen sequentially before the subsequent election?
Well, I just think that we have to try to work together. And actually, I think that the fact that we want to have universal suffrage and an election that would give the voters genuine choice, that thing itself is not problematic, it's not controversial within the pro-democracy camp or even amongst Hong Kong people. Although, of course, some Hong Kong people will say, okay, we can't get it in one go, we take it step by step. But I said, Beijing said this is the real thing, so what step are we talking about? So I guess the real thing, universal suffrage, there is not that much dispute. Even within the pro-Beijing camp, they understand that what Beijing offered was not the real thing, but they say, well, why don't you have it first? But the question is, how do we then work together to engage Beijing? Because I think people accept you have to engage them. You are not going to have a revolution, and you are not going to have armed rebellion. So how do we engage Beijing to try to, begin this dialogue so we can have confidence in each other, so we can really talk business? So it is something that, takes time, and that's why I think if they are willing to start talking to us, I think that is a beginning.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time this week. I really do appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Again, I'd like to thank Emily Lau for joining me from her office in Hong Kong this week. But what I would like to know is, what do you think we'll see next in Hong Kong? This episode of Asia Now features extended content of material originally broadcast as part of the Asian News Weekly podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, please share it with your friends, and if you haven't, subscribe. Subscribing is free, and when you do, the next episode is delivered automatically to you. You can subscribe on our website, asiannewsweekly.net, or in your favorite podcast application. You can also keep up with more news from the region by following Asian News Weekly on Facebook or Twitter. And if you have any comments, questions, or feedback, please drop us an email message. That address is podcast@asiannewsweekly.net. Thank you so much for joining us, and until next time, remember to be true to yourself and to always be awesome.